and Gloria's muted. So we'll
I have started the recording.
Great, thank you. All right, so I just want to give you a few reasons, if you have not already joined the Illinois Recycling Foundation, why you should. And we are a 501c3 educational organization. We are dedicated to waste reduction, reuse, recycling, and supporting markets for recycled content materials. The members come together to seek solutions to the challenges that impact this mission, and we express our concerns to state agencies and political leaders when necessary. We welcome members of industry, government, educational institutions, and nonprofits that share our goal. We have been around for 40 years as the collective voice for recycling in Illinois. All our members are eligible to attend our webinars free of charge, which obviously if you're a member today, you know. There are no fees if you're a member and you'd like to post a job with us, and we will use our social media and our website to help get that word out for you. All our members are listed in our website directory, which is one of the most used pages on our website. Monthly emails cover current topics that impact recycling, not only here in Illinois, but sometimes nationally or globally. The newsletter features at least one member every month. Member activities are also highlighted in our social media, so make sure you share your press releases with us. And also all of our members are members of the National Recycling Coalition. We believe our dues are quite reasonable depending on your size and type of organization. You can see those below. Without further ado, I want to start the Illinois Recycling Foundation's Material Management Advisory Council Recommendations webinar today. We are sponsored by Call to Recycle. Obviously, we need some sponsorship dollars to keep our program going. It's not all membership dues, and I want to thank Call to Recycle for stepping up and doing that for us this month. Since its inception, Call to Recycle has grown from an idea by a small group of battery manufacturers to a leading not-for-profit battery stewardship and recycling program. Over 27 years and more than 130 million pounds of batteries collected and recycled, Call to Recycle provides convenient, safe, and responsible battery recycling at over 15,000 collection sites across the United States. For more information, please visit calltorecycle.org. Today's agenda will feature James Jennings from the Illinois EPA, Walter Willis from the Solid Waste Agency of Lake County, and Kay McKean from Scarce. I'm also assisted, lovely, by Gloria, and John Tiglar will be joining us as well to help with our queuing of the questions at the end. James Jennings has been the Waste Reduction and Compliance Section Manager for the Illinois EPA since 2016 and is responsible for managing the Illinois EPA Bureau of Land and Material Management Programs, RCRA and Solid Waste Compliance Programs, and state and federal reporting obligations. James is a member of the Environmental Council of the state's Compliance Governance Team, a member of the ASTS-WMO, Sustainable Materials Management Task Force, a board member of the Land of Lincoln chapter of SWANA, and a government liaison to our Illinois Recycling Foundation. Prior to becoming section manager, James served as legal counsel to the Illinois EPA, representing the agency in a variety of land and water regulatory and enforcement matters. James has also worked for the Illinois Executive Inspector General and the Kentucky Department of Public Advocacy. James obtained his law degree from the University of Kentucky and his undergraduate degree from the University of Cincinnati. With that, I'm going to let James start us off by telling us all about his work on the Materials Management Advisory Committee. Council, sorry.
I see it. Thanks, Marta. This is by absolutely no means my work. I mean, it just looks, as Marta was talking, scrolling through the list of participants, I mean, a number of people who've been integral to the committee's work to this point are on the call today. And we're about 10 weeks out from finishing up what was, under any circumstances, a really ambitious task that's only been further complicated by COVID-19. And so The fact that we're even able to have this presentation today is a testament to the great work that everybody who's on the committee, and particularly those who were on this call, have the work that you all have done to ensure that we're able to actually advance this stuff, as Marta put in her opening, out of the 1980s. So in 2019, Governor Pritzker signed a bill creating the Statewide Materials Management Advisory Committee. And the function of the committee was really to advance how in the state of Illinois we think about recycling, solid waste, and materials management. And the primary deliverable for us as a committee was to send the General Assembly a report outlining how we go from where we are today to minimizing the waste that goes to landfills over the next 20 years. And the report that we'll send includes all the items that are you can see on your screen for right now, but it's a evaluation of the statewide waste composition, an analysis of the markets for divertible materials, and then materials to target for diversion, and a roadmap for how we actually accomplish that. One of the primary objectives, and one that has been discussed at length by the committee, is what our actual diversion goals need to be and how we'll achieve them. In addition to that, we'll have a map of permanent facilities, as well as other facilities that are integral in helping maximize landfill diversion, and provide some content to standardize how units of local government that are required by law to report to the state, how they can effectively do that every 5 years. Next slide, please. And so to tackle this, pre-COVID, one of the concepts that we had was that we needed to make sure that we were segmenting out each of these items into one of 5 areas. And so what our team proposed, and what the committee ultimately elected to adopt, was a model that mirrors how US EPA approaches America Recycles Day efforts. And so we divided the work among 5 committees: education and outreach, infrastructure development, market development, measurement, and local government support. As one of the committee members pointed out, when we conceptualized this in February of last year, none of us necessarily contemplated certainly the extent of COVID-19 and how long we would be working remotely, but also the fact that using this model lends itself to lots of meetings. And by my count, I think that we've had 8 to 10 people who have probably sat in nearly 100 meetings for this group to this point. And so it's been a process, but this structure enabled us to be able to have some of the finer conversations in a manner that avoided having to take everything to the 25-person committee once a month, every month. Next slide, please. And so where we are right now is, of those 5 subcommittees, 2 have actually been retired. And we have the other 3 that are getting very close to wrapping up as well. And what the retirement of those committees means is that the subcommittee made recommendations to the entire group, and the group in these cases unanimously adopted them. And where we are right now is that we've identified some additional funding that is we've determined is absolutely critical for the state's materials management future. The first is $1 million annually to support recycling, composting, and other materials management market development grants. Those would ultimately be shepherded by a market development advisory board that would be comprised of representatives of the agency, University of Illinois, as well as other relevant industry experts, to ensure that we're targeting projects that will in fact have a positive impact on landfill diversion. In addition to that, the committee has recommended $1 million of additional funding for statewide education and outreach. One of the findings for this group has been that Illinois is actually in the minority of states in how we finance these programs on a statewide level. And given the relative successes in other jurisdictions, we feel that that's worth emulating, and our current revenues would actually support this. And so we, in effect, the proposal to the General Assembly on these fronts is that that we have money available. The money is right now sitting. It needs to be appropriated to accomplish the purposes of the Environmental Protection Act. There's been some other related recommendations that have been adopted. A statewide waste reduction marketing campaign. The concept there is actually one borrowed from Florida, where we would bring in outside subject matter experts to provide us specifically tailored content that addresses some of the unique nuances of Illinois to enable it to resonate with our citizens. Just a recognition that while there is a lot of things a regulatory agency can do, that's not necessarily within our skill set, but we do have the statutory ability to contract it out. And then we have a number of items that are very, very much data driven. One of the revelations of this that was implicitly recognized at the outset is that there's a lot of data that is not currently available statewide. And in order for us to make sound policy decisions and to be faithful to our commitment to maximize landfill diversion, we have to know what we're doing. And so there have been some proposals to ensure that the state is effectively warehousing the information we need to be able to provide the public data to make to evaluate what we're doing, the effectiveness of these programs statewide, and then to avoid having to recreate the wheel every 5 to 7 years with a committee that is aggregating data that is currently scattered across multiple different jurisdictions and other bodies. Next slide, please. So we also have recommendations that are pending. And so what I want to highlight from these is that this slide touches on items that have been discussed in detail and by the committee and various subcommittees and are on the precipice of being adopted with some minor tweaks. And so I tried to keep this somewhat open-ended because, I mean, it's certainly possible that these items are not ultimately picked up by the group. The first and primary item is the statewide diversion targets. The most recent discussion of this was during our March statewide meeting, and the resolution at that point was to go with these concrete figures for statewide diversion. This hasn't been subject to a vote from the entire committee, and so these numbers certainly could change. I know Shantanu Pai has identified how this would potentially be achievable, but again, this is something that has been discussed but not formally adopted. So we at least are on track for that. We've also proposed a stratified approach for how we would target individual materials. One of the concerns at the outset in identifying specific materials to target as opposed to taking a more holistic approach was that the narrower view didn't lend itself well to necessarily adapting over time. And a fear that was expressed by many members on the committee and a fear that our team had would be that if we author a report today that says these 5 items that are currently in the waste stream are critical to maximizing landfill diversion and need to be addressed, well-intentioned but ultimately uninformed reader of the report in 6 years could pick that up and misunderstand that the document, it should be read as a living document and things change over time. And so this is, Shantanu has done a wonderful job segmenting out some individual waste streams that have common elements that could lend itself to being more broadly addressed, as opposed to saying that today we need to target these 2 items and that's the magic bullet for hitting our statewide goals. And then in addition to that, there's some further data gathering enhancements that have been discussed in detail and just haven't been yet up for a formal adoption. Something that I should have included on this slide, but did not in my prep, is that we're very close on having local government standardized plans being picked up. And then we also have proposals for annual appropriations to support infrastructure grants for recycling, composting facilities. And then there's been some discussion about expanding HHW. On those, we're also very close on getting those adopted. I know Walter has put in an immense amount of work to get his document in great shape. And I'll throw this out to everyone who's on today. If you haven't gotten an email from Sunil already with the Speak Now or Forever Hold Your Peace date, comment on this document by Friday. And if any comments that we don't get by that point in time wouldn't necessarily make their way into the agenda for the next infrastructure meeting. This is a document that is we got a consensus around it, and we need to go forward. So if you haven't had a chance, take a look at that one, because the information in there is in good shape, and I think that we're ready to also retire that group as well. Next slide, please. So as I said, Shantanu has pulled together a matrix of the, I believe, 47 categorical waste streams that we had good data on. And then he has segmented them out into 4 broad categories, each of which has its own unique approach on how to go about maximizing diversion from within that. And I don't want to read all of these to you, because I want to make sure that we get time for each of the other speakers. But in general, how these break down is that there's a category of waste streams where there are end markets that are available. There's infrastructure to get them from consumers to the end markets, and there's processing infrastructure as well. There just are some additional enhancements that may need to be made to make that entire process more efficient. Our second category would be for programs that exist in some areas, but not all areas of the state. Processing infrastructure is consequently limited, and there would be some benefit in having external support or state support for expanding those opportunities to ensure better statewide access. The third are really pilot programs, areas where both the markets and the infrastructure are under development, but some of the more trailblazing areas of the state have been wonderful advocates in pushing these programs forward. And we need to, and the best way for us to attack those waste streams is to find ways to scale that to a larger audience. And then finally, the emerging waste streams, so things where there may not be technology or limited technology to recover items. It's unclear what the end markets are or will be, but they're items that we collectively understand exist and will be part of the problem going forward. And this is really a nod to the reality that this report contemplates 20 years of policy work, not just things as they exist today. Next slide. So the slide here is an example of Shantanu's breakdown. These are some items that if Marta would like, I can forward to her and she can circulate to the group. This slide is a recolored but identical slide to one that was discussed in part of our February meeting. But it highlights the approach that Shantanu is taking and some of the higher level figures that have gone into his analysis. But again, Marta, if you think that it'd be valuable, I can forward the most recent iteration of that to you, and you can send it to everybody who's on today. And next slide. All right, so that's it for me, at least for this portion. I'm certainly happy to take any questions either at the end of this or afterwards. But yeah, I'll turn it over to Walter, who looks thrilled to be getting ready to speak.
Thanks, James. Excellent job, and absolutely send that to us and we will get that out. I'm going to introduce Walter, who's been the executive director of the Solid Waste Agency of Lake County since 2007. He is responsible for overseeing the programs there, implementing the Lake County Solid Waste Management Plan. Mr. Willis is a board member of the Illinois chapter of SWANA, the Illinois Food Scrap Coalition, and an honorary board member of the Product Stewardship Institute. Prior to joining SWALCO, Mr. Willis worked in the waste industry as a consultant for approximately 20 years, developing solid waste management plans and assisting with solid waste facility development projects throughout the United States. He began his solid waste career with the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency in 1987 after receiving his master's in public administration from Southern Illinois University. And with that, I'm going to let you take it away, Walter.
Thanks, Marta, and welcome everyone. I'm going to go over the infrastructure subcommittee. A little background. I actually worked on this legislation as it was passed, so got the pleasure of actually implementing it. So 100 meetings. I didn't know I was up to that many, James. So you kind of bummed me out with that. So, but anyway, it's been a lot of work. And the overall goal of the bill was kind of twofold. One was to kind of create a state plan for the first time. Illinois has really never looked at itself as a state for its solid waste program. It always broke it into the counties, and also do a needs assessment, if you will, kind of get our numbers for 2018. How much do we landfill? How much recycle? Kind of give us a baseline. It also has a very important component to it, which is to help counties develop their 5-year update plans. So there's a lot of effort that's been put into creating an outline and probably a fillable form moving forward that will help counties do their planning so that we get more counties actually planning and implementing their plans. So 2 big goals of the law really are we're trying to go, and as James explained, there's subcomponents. But as far as the infrastructure subcommittee, I am the chair along with Sunil. Each of the subcommittees developed a scope of work to kind of keep us on task. I don't think we fulfilled everything in our scope, but we did most of it and went outside of it on a few things. We've had a lot of meetings, like James said, since last August. We brought in a lot of speakers. We want to learn about some of the new technologies that are out there that might help create solutions for us. We heard a lot of good presentations. You know, INEOS is building a plant in Will County to recycle styrene number 6. So a lot of our e-scrap is ABS plastic. It might be able to go there. So that's exciting to see that infrastructure actually being built. Brightmark is building a plant in Indiana that might help the MRFs and some of their hard to manage plastics. So some real life solutions being proposed. So we've came up to speed on that. As James said, it's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, so it's not easy to get those recommendations home, but we're getting close. I think one more meeting to get our final thoughts onto that document. And the next set of slides are the infrastructure maps. That was a big component of our work, was to try to get these maps so that we know what we have and where we might have gaps, where we might have needs. So next slide. So this one on the municipal landfills, if you looked at our document, where we're at with this is we have a set of findings, then we have a section on challenges, and then we finally come to our recommendations after we acknowledge the findings and the challenges. We then summarize with recommendations. So one of our findings with landfills is, you know, overall throughout the state, there's about 25 years of capacity. I would consider that a lot of capacity. But in certain regions like Region 2, which is up in the Chicagoland area, there's only 12.5 years of capacity, but we know they export a lot. But some regions have 48 years of capacity. So it's across the board, but we do have a lot of landfill capacity in the state. So next slide. So material recovery facilities, we also include in this, and we're working to add on to this, you know, maybe more consolidation type facilities that may feed into a larger material recovery facility. But you can see we've got a big part of the state that doesn't really have a close nearby MRF. And so that's something that we're trying to think through, and that's really why we came up with a recommendation to target some grant monies to downstate Illinois. So, but the Chicagoland market, I'll be honest, if you compare us to Boston and other markets, we're blessed with good competition on our MRFs, and quite a few in the Chicagoland area. As far as capacity, I think we're well situated, but downstate, I think we recognize there's a need for more capacity. Next slide. Transfer stations, you know, ultimately, I hope this map gets broken up into the different types of transfer stations. And that's the way we kind of presented it in our document. But there's a lot of infrastructure in our state regarding garbage transfer stations, right? And construction demolition facilities that treat, or not treat, that process and then try to recycle as much as they can. And then we've got landscape waste transfer stations. So all these transfer stations are important to get material to the end processor in a more efficient way. So we've got a lot of capacity, we've got a lot of infrastructure, but again, you know, when we look at the different layers of the map, we don't have as much construction, demolition, recycling downstate. We don't have as many garbage transfer stations downstate. So those are just some of the findings in the landscape waste. Many of you that live downstate know that a lot of times you don't even have landscape waste service. So you're pretty much on your own. But you know, some of the bigger towns, Springfield, Peoria, obviously collect yard waste and have facilities. So we looked at that. Next slide. Drop-off locations. These are primarily, I don't think these have the electronics drop-offs. I could be wrong on that. I'm not exactly sure. I think these are just traditional recycling drop-offs that you could bring either curbside recyclables to or food scraps. I believe those are what the drop-offs we mapped. James, you might be able to correct me. I don't believe that has the electronics on it.
No, the electronics are on their own map at this point.
Okay, that's right. And the great thing about these maps is they're all different layers, and you know, you can do it interactively online. I love my static maps, as James knows. But next slide. And then compost facilities, another key part of our infrastructure for diversion, right? Between the MRFs and the compost facilities, that's where most of our diverted material will go to. And again, you'll see the compost sites kind of downstate that hover around the bigger towns and the rural areas. You know, having done planning in a lot of rural counties, there's just not a lot of yard waste that's collected. You're kind of on your own, which greenscape on your own, that's the way to go anyway. So compost facilities, we've got a good handle on it. They report annually to the IEPA, and they handle about 500,000 tons of material right now. If we are successful in diverting food scraps like we want, you can see a 4 or 5-fold increase in that. So that's the market development's problem, committee's problem, right? Just kidding. Next slide. Oh, I do have separate C&D recycling. All right. And again, you'll see that a lot of the activity for construction demo is up in the Chicagoland area. We do have a few, a company down in Bloomington Normal, I know, that is pretty progressive on that. So it can be done throughout the state. But again, we see a need for more downstate C&D processing. Next slide. And the HHW facilities. This slide, I think, shows, you know, 3 different layers. The permanent sites, you know, Swalco owns one of those. Very happy to have that and the IEPA's help on that. And there's 4 others, right? They're all basically in Northern Illinois, but we've got Madison County forging ahead. It looks like to have their own, and also a private one in Peoria County that Peoria Disposal Company is going to do as part of a landfill expansion. That was part of the deal, was to build an HHW as part of that. So, and then we've got the hub cities that IEPA is working on. So we're getting better coverage. I know Susan Monte, I don't know if she's on, but she wants more, and others on the committee are looking for more as well. And that's reflected in our final recommendations. So next slide. Electronics. So we know about what, 50, 60 counties, you know, have opted in, 85, 90% of the population. And I believe, you know, you can see that we've still got a very strong and vibrant electronics collection network in Illinois, and every county in the state can opt in if they want. So I don't believe this shows one-day events necessarily, but more the permanent sites. So pretty good network out there, I would say, based on that law. Next slide. All right, this is my last slide. So these are pending and kind of hard to read, I will say, but the $1 million in grant funding, that would be a one-time is what we're recommending in the next 5 years. So not 1 million every year, but 1 million once every in the next 5 years. 40% of that would go to counties with less than 100,000 and 60 would go to counties with more. The 40% to the rural counties would be targeted at MRFs, C&D recycling and drop-offs. The ones for 100,000 plus or more upstate, if you will, would be focused on MRFs only. So that was a last minute compromise that we made with the group. We've also got $1 million in composting infrastructure. So that would be for new, all these are for new or existing, right? And also would include anaerobic digestion, windrow, et cetera. And there would be 2 grant rounds with that, the same split, downstate and upstate, targeting the monies, trying to get more development in both areas. So the HHW, right now, we're recommending that the agency contemplate needing to allocate funding for 5 new sites. And based on our facility and 3 others, the average cost to run one of these for the IEPA is about $275,000 to manage the material that we get and transport it for destruction or recycling. So using that times 5, you get 1.375 million would be the annual additional money that would be needed if we did 5 new sites. So one of the things that we've started to struggle with as the MMAC is, are we running out of money for all these ideas and where are we at on the ledger? So those are one of the things that came up in our last meeting was, you know, James is saying, we've got $1 million for the education, we've got $1 million for market development, that's every year. Do we have, how much money do we have left? So that's something we still have to drill down on as a committee, to be honest. Are we living within our means still? So that gets to the next one. We can't just rely on the solid waste fund, right? When and if we truly divert organics, 20–25% from the landfill, my money goes way down. My landfill lasts longer, but the amount of money I get every year goes way down since I collect a fee on the 2 landfills in the county. And anyone else that is either using the state fee or a local surcharge or a local host fee would see their money go down. So what are we going to do when we need $20–25 million every year to run this program through the IEPA? So things we're going to be talking about, not necessarily taking a position on, would be the bottle bill. It creates a huge amount of unredeemed money that could be filtered back as a funding source. You know, my research in New York is it's close to $80 million a year that goes unredeemed. That could be earmarked, right? Or packaging extended producer responsibility, where we would shift the entire cost for residential recycling programs to the brand owners, people that we buy their products in the grocery stores mainly. They would pay for those programs. That's being done in Canada and Europe, and 5 states are now pursuing legislation to that effect. So we'll have text on that. We looked at other states. I think Michigan uses an internet tax. So we need to diversify our funding as our landfills, you know, become less significant for our waste stream management. So we see the value of the private sector and the developing infrastructure with the private sector. You've got a lot of trade groups, associations, et cetera, that are giving money to MRFs to try different products, to give them new equipment. So we need to continue to have that type of collaboration for infrastructure, especially with plastics. We're seeing a lot of focus on circular economy for plastics. We also, as far as infrastructure, we did look at the bigger picture of food recovery, not just managing into the pipe compost. So that's why that recommendation that EPA and Ag should work together to create an asset map and database for food recovery, basically specialty farms, et cetera, that have excess food. Where are they? Can we connect them to food banks? People that want to donate food in general, can we connect them to food banks? So those that have access to those that need, creating a database so that that can be better connected. James has to go study and figure out what he means. Do we have to cite anaerobic digesters through SB 172 local siting or not? There's still a little confusion on that, but we do have quite a bit of anaerobic digesting capacity in our state already that wouldn't have to go through siting if it were allowed, you know, some sort of exemption. So the city of Chicago, for example, has very large anaerobic digesters that they've tried to get food scraps into, but so far have been unsuccessful. But and then finally, those maps that we showed you, some of you that have looked back in history at the old annual capacity report the IEPA puts together every year, used to have a lot more in it. We're advocating that all these maps be updated annually and that they be presented in that report. So that report becomes more than just a landfill capacity report, which I know is the statutory mandate for the IEPA, is just the landfill capacity. But now that we've gone to this struggle, and I'm sure James agrees, and Shantanu and Suzanne, from that we figured out hopefully how better to track these, which is a challenge for the state, so that we have a good idea where our infrastructure is, and for all those different layers. So a lot of work went into that. They're not perfect. So if you have a chance to see them and you don't see a facility you know of, let us know. We want them to get as good as we can. So Marta, I am done. I don't know if I went over my time. Too bad if I did, right? So
You did great.
I'll move it
Walter,
over
as
to
always.
Kay so she can get us all excited about education.
Perfect. I get a slide. Oh, there. We missed this slide. I don't know if that's you or James.
I think that was mine. I was running. We touched on this, and I think that it's shows what we still have outstanding. So these are all public meetings. Anybody who's wants to participate can call in, as Walter said. This month we're going to have a good discussion on EPR, landfill bans, and some of the other broader policy things around which there was not going to be a concrete consensus. And the agenda for that will actually go out this afternoon or tomorrow after the local government subcommittee meeting today. So Marta's on the list. Feel free to forward the meeting documents to your entire listserv. But yeah, we're almost there. And as Lisa Disbro told me yesterday, all of us need to, once we're able to go be normal again, go to the longest happy hour imaginable, because 100 meetings is a lot with anybody, especially doing it all remotely. So yeah, I'll turn it over to Kay now, but we're almost done. And thanks to everybody who's gotten us to this point.
Sorry, Kay, real quick, Marta, I forgot to mention a bill that I think is illustrative of the need for infrastructure. It's Senate Bill 1167 has been filed, and that bill would create a tiered ban on food scraps going to the landfill. So any restaurant or grocery store that generates more than 2 tons a week would, if they were within 15 miles of a compost site, would need to go compost instead of landfill. One of the big reasons where we've kind of like told the sponsor, hey, great idea, great concept, but we don't have the infrastructure or the markets, right? So they're connected. So infrastructure is key if we want to move, and that's a significant piece of legislation if we got passed in Illinois, but we need the infrastructure in the markets. So sorry, Kay.
No worries.
It's all good. I was thinking you were going to talk about the carpet bill. So I'm going to introduce Kay without any further ado and sidetracks. She is the founder and executive director of SCARCE, Wheaton Environmental Improvement Commission member since 1981. Kay McKean has over 30 years of experience educating people of all ages on recycling and resource conservation and serving the community as an environmental advocate and advisor. Through her passion and knowledge, she has guided many schools, organizations, and municipalities to make sustainable and healthy changes that continue to help our planet, wildlife, and our communities thrive. And if you have not met Kay, you need to.
Hi, everybody. I am really glad to be part of this whole program. It's been an incredible opportunity to work with people from around the state and so many industries. I've really enjoyed it. It has been a lot of work, and I specifically want to thank Rose on our team, Rose Nassif. She has done a tremendous amount of the research as we've worked on this committee, and my co-chair, of course, Don Buies. We got a lot done, and it was great working with everybody. We know that education is key to just about anything. If you want to make change, people have to know what the problems are and what the solutions are. So you can see in this slide, we actually are taking photos of mistakes at the recycling bins and laundry baskets and styrofoam coolers and wicker baskets and shelving units and styrofoam coolers. I think I said plastic bags filled with recyclables. When we put these on Facebook, you guys, it gets shared, 150 times. It goes to 29,000 people. This is an easy way to start educating people, but this high contamination rate is a huge problem for our recycling industry, for the people working in as the haulers, and of course the people working at the MRFs. And at the end of all of this, these things don't get recycled, they get landfilled. So go ahead, Marta. You can go to the next slide. There we go. So we looked at a lot of the different challenges, frequent changes, and variety of packaging, variations of one hauler does one thing, one hauler does something else. They in their bid competitions or in their promotions, they're saying different things, and people are seeing so many different things. You might have a contract with your community for 3 years or 5 years with a hauler, and then you get a new hauler. It's just a lot of change. Wish cycling, thinking that at the other end of that recycling bin is somebody who actually looks at what you put in your recycling bin and says, yes, it is recyclable, not understanding that they're sorting 360 tons in a shift and things like that. Curbside collections versus special collections and how different that is. If your school is collecting juice pouches, that does not go into your curbside bin. So much information is changing with the special collections, mail-in collections, and so forth. The public trust has been really battered. If they see what they think as a hauler putting their recyclables into the garbage, if they see something in the papers, there's a lot of misinformation. And so a lot of people don't really trust what's happening once they get their items to the curb. But if half of what they're putting in the recycling bin is garbage, they're part of the problem. So education is huge. Abusing the system, hiding electronics in their recycling bins, fly dumping into businesses where people leave their electronics or they leave their hazardous waste or they dump their garbage because they don't want to pay for a sticker. Politics and import bans, it's in the paper a lot, it's on the news. And so people see this and they think, oh, my pop bottle's not getting recycled because they don't have the information, they don't have the education. And then the diversity in the stakeholders, whether they're a plastic bag company, whether they're a hauler that does have access to a special item to being recycled. It's really, really difficult. Next slide, Marta. So what we did is we kind of broke it up. Some of you are old like me, and you remember that we could recycle the newspaper. You had to take out the comics, the color pages, and it had to take out the glossies. And so all of this has evolved. It's great. More items can be recycled, but some people just really don't understand. So do we still have to take the envelopes, the windows out of our envelopes? And should we take out the battery that's in that birthday card that sings to me? So a lot of packaging changes, materials. Who knew there'd be batteries in our gift cards? Lids on and lids off. I think we hear that question in every single program that I give. And we've got a hauler in our county that is telling people no plastic lids when the industry is asking for plastic lids. Go ahead. Makes it hard for people to come up when there's differences with communities. So if you drive through a community and you see plastic bags of clothes in their recycling bin, then you think, oh, we can put plastic bags in our recycling, or, oh, we can put clothes in our recycling bin. So each community has wonderful opportunities, but the residents, as they drive by, it's very confusing for them. What can they do? What can't they do? Sometimes there's a long space of time between when you get information about your hauler and what can go in your bin and when it's getting ready for a new contract. Go ahead. So the different messaging, I think one of the things that has hurt us is when the messaging is on a postcard or in their water bill or wherever, and it says paper. Well, then that means paper cups and paper plates and paper towels, when it doesn't mean that at all. Or when it says glass, well, then why not windows? Why not mirrors? Why not my orange juice glass? Why not my light bulbs? Batteries, yes and no. So in your electronics, your battery stays in your electronics. What about the other batteries? You guys, the simple messaging when we went to one word with no clip art is really difficult. And can you imagine? I know in many of our counties, we have hundreds of languages. There are hundreds of languages spoken in Illinois. I think in DuPage County, it's like 63 languages. So a single word of glass or plastic doesn't really help them. We need those shapes and those simple shapes to educate people about how to properly recycle. Go ahead. And then that hauler competition. We have a great hauler and they were interested in rescuing more metal. And in Chantanu's matrix, he was showing how the more metal we recycle, the more reduce our carbon footprint. And of course, we save those resources. But if a hauler puts in their list pots and pans, the next things they see is somebody putting in their grill. And so residents kind of think, if it's the same kind of material, we can throw it into the bin. And they just take those big, huge steps. And so we need that education to be solid for our residents across Illinois. Go ahead. Wish cycling, yes, I hope so. They'll figure it out when they get there. I'll let them figure it out. They know what they're doing. But that leads to tons and tons of garbage and non-recyclables going to our sorting facilities and then backtracking back to a landfill. So when in doubt, keep it out, then find out. Give us a call, give us an email. Jen Jarlin from Kane County had a great word. She called it reset, like you reset your computer, restart your computer. We almost need to start again with those very simple ways of recycling, simple messages. Go ahead. Curbside versus special collections. Like we said, if your kids collect Capri Suns and those pouches at their school, and then they're no longer at the school, then people put them into the recycling bins. And that doesn't work. And it adds to the garbage that our MRFs have to sort. It adds to what the haulers then have to take back to a landfill. So understanding that those special collections, somehow when we have those special collections or special opportunities, that has to be clearly marked for residents to know the difference. Next slide. So that public trust, and we're seeing it in the paper just about every week. People are very afraid that they're washing out recyclables and the pop bottles are going into the landfill. They don't know that we have good infrastructure, that we have markets for pop bottles. I really like that commercial now where they're showing the pop bottle industry wanting the bottles back and with the caps on, kind of a big team effort. Again, that has nothing to do with single-use recycling and banning those items, but at least they're trying education and showing what those items then can become. And that builds trust. Education builds trust. Next slide. That abusing the system. This is a not-for-profit that is in Carroll Stream. Their doors are blocked. They come to work on Monday morning and their doors are blocked. During COVID, people have had time to clean out, to go through everything in their houses. We're seeing it here at Scarce. More and more supplies than ever have been coming in. People have time, so they're going through their garage, they're going through the shed, they're going through all their books. They're going through items they think could help somebody. I'm hoping that it's in goodwill, that they're hoping that they're helping somebody by dropping off, but that does not help the not-for-profits. Fly dumping hurts our businesses. And I live on a park, you guys. People walk past the park and they've changed their kid's diaper and they put their dirty diaper. I've watched them into my recycling bin. And then I have to go out, of course, and take that dirty diaper out of my recycling bin and bag it up and put it into my garbage. They're at least not littering it. They're not leaving it on the ground. Thank goodness for that. But fly dumping is big and fly dumping is little. And the after hours dumping, some businesses, their dumpster gets emptied in the morning. And by noon of that day, their dumpster is full with people who don't want to have to pay for the sticker. So people do not really understand the issues of the hazardous waste and electronics, how much fly dumping costs them. And then the after hours dumping, it's convenient for them to drop it off on a Sunday when the not-for-profit is closed, but it certainly is not good for the not-for-profit. Go ahead, Marta. And we're seeing, of course, people responding to the bans, to the dumping in our oceans of recyclables, of cities in India that are inundated with plastics. There's an incredible movie, I'm not sure if you've seen it, called Plastic China. It is about flexible plastics and which ones are recyclable and which ones are not. And the people actually take the flexible plastics that are not recyclable and burn them to cook their food, and the black smoke is everywhere in their village. So really understanding, getting the information out in the newspapers and through our city newsletters and through proper public relations of what is happening and how we can be part of the solution is really important. Go ahead, Marta. We talked a little bit about the diverse stakeholders and that extended producer responsibility. I know that in Germany, the extended producer responsibility has been a huge way in decreasing their garbage. So the manufacturers, the businesses, the material recovery facilities, the recyclers, haulers, all of these people have an interest in rescuing, recovering resources. But of course, not if it bothers their industry. So the plastic bag industry is not excited at all about plastic bag bans or a tax on plastic bags. The beverage industry, as we said, is not interested in single-use plastic recycling, plastic straws, plastic bottles, and all of those kinds of items. So there is a lot to consider for education, and then getting that education and information out to the public in a way that they can understand. So we did a lot of research. Go ahead. The impacts of that contamination, batteries. We just had another fire in a hauling vehicle in Lombard about 2 weeks ago today. Those batteries are a huge problem. Yes, there are ways to recycle batteries, but it is not easy for the general public. It is probably one of our top phone calls, where to take the batteries. And it's hard. EPA says throw them in the garbage, send them to a landfill. Well, but then there's fires because they don't know the alkaline batteries from the lithium batteries necessarily. And with all the language barriers, people are trying to do the best in many, many ways. And so the paper shredding truck, we had a paper shredding truck that was on fire, and they believe it was the shredders get so hot, the metal shredders, and then they have a lithium battery go through, and that sets a spark. And their papers were, the documents are gone. They were shredded, and then they were burned, and then the fire department empties them out and waters it all down. So their information is for sure gone, but what a mess it has caused, and how dangerous can it be? Sorting facilities having fires, batteries, and understanding that people need to put hazardous materials to our fabulous household hazardous waste facilities, collections, whether they're in Aurora coming up in June, so that people have that information well in advance so they can plan for it and know what to bring. And that contamination. This picture has helped us educate so many people in our outreach programs. You can see the plastic bags and the bubble wrap and the ribbon and the holiday lights all on these rollers. So we show the clear rollers at the start of a sorting facilities day. And then a couple hours later, we show this. And then we talk about that the staff have to go in with razor knives and pliers to pull all of that plastic out. It takes about 45 minutes. They're walking on rollers. It's very, very dangerous. It's expensive, and we need to do better. And people see that, they go, I had no idea. Again, when our lists say plastic bags are plastic. So we've got to make those lists, and the education piece is much better. Go ahead. So some examples. Again, we did a lot of research, but one of the things that I know a lot of people are concerned about is reducing our carbon footprint. And I have to give a shout out to Walter. He pushed and pushed and pushed during these meetings for recognizing that recycling helps reduce our carbon footprint, and give it a rating, give it a percentage, give us a number of how that helps us reduce our carbon footprint. And I'll tell you, that has been a different approach, and that has made people to kind of take notice of what they're putting in the recycling bin. So it's a great educational piece, and it helps us on multi-levels, not just recovering resources. So thank you for that, Walter. But this slide, it talks about the water saved or water pollution prevented and the reduction in energy by recycling. And so that has been a very valuable way to teach and help people understand to be part of the solution. Go ahead, Marta. So this whole effort, of this whole committee that was formed, this whole council that was formed, we needed to look outside of Illinois for more solutions. So we did a lot of talking to the people. Don and Rose and I did a lot of talking to people in Florida about what they were doing. And then of course, Michigan with their very famous raccoons. At the end of all our work with these two states, they don't have any numbers to show us because a lot of these programs were just starting and COVID hit. And so we were educating people that if you've got a virus, you've got COVID virus in your house, put your recyclables in the garbage. Don't put your masks and your shields and your gloves in your recycling bin. So legislation help and goals help drive it in these two states. And that's what we're doing here in Illinois. Next slide, Marta. So Florida, rethink, reset, recycle, stick to the basics, focus on one issue at a time. They started out with money from their MRFs that wanted to improve the recycling. They formed partnerships with cities and counties and businesses to help fund their start. And then their agency, the Department of Natural Resources, puts money in as well. But we were able to see some of their posters developed by a marketer. They hired a marketing company, and the posters have one item or one issue. And I think that's really helpful, very simple, good design of the shape of what we want or what we don't want. Go ahead. The funding, again, as I say, in materials recovery, they help fund it, partnerships with businesses, and then they have a website that their organization, their department funds and manages the website, and they have the graphic design. I think the graphic design part of the contract was $60,000. So not that much money. And they have continued, those partnerships have continued, and they've actually grown in Florida to help them fund education, outreach, and so forth. Go ahead. So they really did tailoring it for their different counties. And we noticed when we had these statewide meetings, Sarah would talk very, very well about what's going on in Southern Illinois. And so she has one hauler who does this and one hauler who does this. And so they've got two different flyers for their area to educate people about what you can put in your recycling bin. Of course, nobody wants the plastic bags, so that's pretty easy. Clean and dry, those kinds of things are easy, but they did kind of hyper focus to their different counties and to their haulers. But of course, they had some money from the MRFs and the haulers and the businesses and the partnerships. So that really helped keep this project going well. Go ahead. Michigan, know it before you throw it. Started, of course, right before the COVID hit. Their raccoons are very, very friendly. Who doesn't like raccoons? Their cartoons, the marketing company, the videos that were made, really good. They wanted to reduce their contamination and double the state's recycling rate by 30% by 2025. They're part of the Renew Michigan Environmental Initiative, again, legislated to do that. They designated $5 million for this project to start out. I believe the number was, everything that they've done was less than $3.5 million, but a huge marketing campaign and TV commercials. We've got a slide on all the ways they tried to educate. Go ahead. They did surveys through the marketing firms to develop a campaign around their findings and the recycling raccoons. And each raccoon represents a different material for recycling. So it made it kind of fun. They had different sweaters on and vests and things like that. Go ahead, Marta. Billboards on their buses, TV, radio, websites, social media, Pandora, which I thought was a bracelet. So that's how much I know about radios, content marketing, sponsorships at baseball things and golf outings and football teams. Their mascots, of course, I think raccoons appeal to people, washing their hands and so forth. So they're kind of a friendly critter. Press events where they were at an event and had their raccoons come to show up and explain what was going on. They had a lot of fun with it. And I think it's really appealing. Everybody at our committee, we kind of talked about maybe just asking if we could borrow their recycling raccoons or their whites, we could use the Illinois white squirrels and have all our different color squirrels be different items. We had kind of a fun thing with it, but the idea is animals do appeal to people. And it's, if we want people to get the message, we've got to appeal to them and get them to pay attention, and animals can do that for us. So go ahead. So the tagging of carts, wow, is that controversial, because a lot of people don't want to be told that something doesn't go in their cart. A lot of people don't want their neighbors to see they had something in their cart that didn't belong there. I like the oops or the yikes kind of thing. Yikes, you didn't know that you can't put a TV in your recycling bin. But you guys know, most of our haulers now, their arms pick up the bin and dump it in. They don't even really see what's in the recycling and bin. And you know what? They're timed. They have 1,200 homes or whatever the number is that they have to do. So it's really hard. We've got to find a way to educate residents. We've got to realize that it takes time for our haulers to see what's in the bin, to put a sticker on there. Maybe there does need to be a particular fine or something for residents who continue to hide things in the recycling bin, paints and hazardous waste and those kinds of things. It upsets residents. Residents then call their city. Their city gets too many calls and they go, oh, we're having trouble. Our residents are unhappy. So then when they go out to bid, then they may not look favorably on that hauler, because even the cities don't understand how much this contamination is costing all of us and how it hurts the recycling program. Go ahead. A lot of people work with social media. It's a great way to reach people, Instagram and all those different ways of reaching people. But we know that people do best when they hold something. Studies show when you have a piece of paper in your hand that you can read and read it a couple of times, put it on your refrigerator so you can go back and check. Maybe you're the one who read the mail, but there's other people in your household that need to know what goes in the recycling bin. Putting signs right on the recycling bin. So Carrie on our team, her sign is on the top of her recycling bin. And over this winter, which was really a pretty mild winter, it's almost all faded off. At my home, the recycling bin is inside the lid. So when you open the lid, it goes, oh, that doesn't go in there. No styrofoam in my bin, no electronics, no batteries. That's on the inside. So it doesn't get bleached out by the sun or washed off by the rain and the snow. And it's right there when you open the bin. It is not going to solve all the problems, but it is a way to help. And maybe some of the money that would come from this legislation would help haulers. Some of the haulers talked about the time it takes to stop at every house with a new sticker, or something new is recyclable, or now there's a problem with the face masks and the shields and the gloves and they can't go into your recycling bin with COVID. So is there a way to get the information out in high quantity to lots and lots of people? So we are working on a resource list of major organizations throughout Illinois. The Illinois Rotary Clubs, the Illinois Lions Club, the Illinois Kiwanis, the Junior Women's, the Illinois Organic Gardeners, the Illinois Gardeners, the city clerks. We're working on a major list that when there is a specific issue, batteries or COVID, that we can get the word out to a lot of people, not necessarily in the recycling industry, but they have access to residents all over the state of Illinois. And that might be a good way to educate a lot of people really fast when there's a special issue. So we want to make sure that the direct outreach, whether it's a flyer, a magnet, something on their bin, is current, up to date as possible. Go ahead. Glass recycling, you guys, we heard loud and clear, Southern Illinois glass is heavy. The markets aren't there. It's heavy to ship glass. So we did some research, and with Shantanu's help, there are markets for glass. We have the technology to process glass. It's infinitely recyclable. So those are the good parts, but it's a long distance to move your glass and it weighs a lot. So it's a barrier to glass recycling. And it hurts our other recyclables. That glass gets embedded into cardboard, embedded into newspaper, embedded into plastic. So it's a problem. So we did some extra research on what's going on around the county, around the state, If you can go to the next slide, Marta. Portland, Oregon, they have a yellow bin and your glass goes into the yellow bin. Other recyclables, plastic, metal, paper, go into your regular blue toter. They also have a bottle bill in Oregon. So that is a way to keep the glass from hurting the recyclables, right? And a way to get that, keep it separate so you have a clean product. The glass is recyclable in a clean way for the residents. Easy to understand. Go ahead. Tucson, Arizona, they did something that we know can be done. It could be done across the country. Their glass is recycled in purple drop-off containers distributed around the city. The city crushes the glass and uses it in their sandbags, uses it as road underlayment in construction projects. Look at the greenhouse gas reduction in emissions. And of course, it saves money. So keep your glass local. We were able to start this project in a little country called Bonaire. They were shipping glass and taking glass out into the ocean and dumping it. We were able to work with their rotary there and in just a short presentation, get them to crush their glass, keep it on the island, use it they were shipping in gravel for their roads. Crush it up, put it under your asphalt, use that mineral right there for under your roads. They no longer have a glass recycling problem for Bonaire. So this was a really great project. It's great to see projects right here in our own country that save money and specifically reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. Go ahead. So again, that producer responsibility. I'm so glad that the water bottle and pop bottle industry, is working on every bottle back. That is an educational commercial, you guys, because it's showing the pellets that are made. It's showing a little tiny bit of the recycling process, and it says it's being made into new bottles. So in a very short, fun kind of commercial, you see that Geico has a commercial where somebody's pulling their recycling bin, kind of crazy, but then he's flattening all the cardboard. It's just a very short kind of subliminal message, but there are fun ways to educate, and we need to find those fun ways and those effective ways. Extended producer responsibility was a big part of our topics. Batteries were a big part of our topics for safety for other haulers. And then how we reach people, it cannot be on one level. It cannot just be a magnet. It cannot just be a flyer. We need those billboard ideas. We need mass communication kinds of ideas. And then we need to make it pertinent, relevant, up to date, up to the minute, so residents know where they are. And when we change something, caps on, caps off of plastic, caps off of glass bottles, right? Then people go, oh, something's improved. We need to educate them that there's something that improves, something that changed. So now we get to recycle more. Or why is that a problem? Kind of a product with the gloves and the masks and things like that. So we need to be able to reach residents across Illinois in a fast way, effective way, and understand that there's hyper local issues that we need to be prepared to work with and understand their barriers. So I think that's everything. I'm sorry if I went a little bit over, but there was a lot to education, and I really, really appreciated being on this council.
Well, thanks, Kay. No, I think you summed up so many different issues and the challenges that we face trying to educate on a statewide basis. But I love the progress that is being made, and Walter's efforts to infrastructure, try and get everybody lined up on where their infrastructure is, where the holes are. So I want to thank all of you, James included there, not only for today's presentation, but all the time that you've been working over the past 18 months. I also want to remind everybody who's here today that we have another webinar coming up on May 19th on foam recycling options and possibilities. And I hope we see many of you, if not all of you, back here again next month. I want to thank too our event sponsor today, Call to Recycle, and sponsorships are open for next month's webinar for those of you who are interested. So we are going to open up our questions and answers portion of today's meeting. And we hope that many of you, I've been unable to look at the chat, but hopefully many of you have been putting questions into the chat. And I don't know, Gloria, did you have a first question to ask the panel?
We don't have a first question, but John Lardner, one of the IRF board members, posted something in the chat that said that that movie that Kay referenced, Plastic China, it is available this week on the Xfinity Earth Day channel. So might want to take a look at that. But there are no other questions. There are no questions in the chat right now, but we welcome them.
Well, James, do you want to put in a link, do you think, where you on your website, you have where all of the meeting schedules are and things like that? Maybe share that with everybody in the chat.
Yeah,
And,
I'll go ahead and pull that up while we're finishing up.
and was there anything that you feel got missed in today's presentation? Any other tidbits you'd like to offer?
Nothing that jumps out to me. I would encourage people to take a look at the information on our website. I mean, it includes all of the meeting minutes to date, gives a good overview of how we've got to where we are, and then encourage people to keep coming to the last round of meetings. I mean, the reality is that even though we'll be done here in about 2.5 months, the real work of actually accomplishing this picks up after that. I mean, these recommendations need to be carried out. And so in order to ensure that happens, after we all get a little bit of a pause in the summer, I mean, we're gonna have to come back to the table and start to figure out things like what the language would look like to create the market development advisory group, and then how we go about ensuring that we're targeting the right projects for infrastructure awards. So, I mean, public input, particularly educated public input, like from the people who are on today, is going to be critical for us to ensure that this actually achieves what we wanted to.
I did have a question, and that was related to the map of the transfer stations and landfills. So as we looked in the northern region, which is our densely populated and large waste generating area, we're seeing that we're losing landfill space, and we talked about some of the material being exported. Do we see the chance possibly, or the recommendation in any way, of a fee at the transfer stations that service the areas where we're exporting the waste, or all transfer stations for that matter, as a means to generate more revenue for all the different things that we're talking about trying to do, and recognizing we're not going to have enough revenue to do everything?
So that specific item hasn't been raised, but it does go to Walter's larger point that, I mean, we're operating off of a revenue source that will naturally decline if these programs are successful. And so, I mean, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily on or off the table, but it hasn't been raised at this point. But we're going to have to find revenue at some point to support these programs, because if they work, we're going to get less in tipping fees in the relatively near future.
I do want to encourage everybody to try to enter your questions in the chat. I'm going to switch screens so we get to see everybody's face who's on, and make it maybe easier for you to see the chat as well. So I'm going to stop sharing, and there's everybody.
Look at that.
Imagine if we were all together in a room.
Someday,
Raise
right?
your hand. Soon, hopefully soon.
I would just like to say, I'm sorry,
Go
I'd
ahead.
just like to say one thing. Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I think that slide I think the slide that James showed with the metrics that showed the most easily marketable items and the 61% potential in reducing greenhouse gases, that is a really powerful slide. It's a really important slide. Shantanu, I know, did the work, but that slide really with Walter's, emphasis on reducing our CO2, right? Getting those easy to recycle items that kind of went along with Florida, understanding how much they could do better if they could get every aluminum can. And so that slide is a really, really powerful slide. There's, I think, 4 slides in that series. But that first slide, getting the easy stuff, getting the paper and the cardboard, those easy kinds of plastics, everybody should kind of have that slide in their repertoire as they're out teaching or sharing information about this committee. It's really an important slide.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate the next meeting on April 27th, that from 1 to 3, probably in the beginning, James, I'm assuming we'll have a presentation from Product Stewardship Institute, and they're 2 experts on packaging EPR. They're going to kind of introduce us to the overall concept, how it works, and then what some of the other state legislation is looking like. I know it's a fairly controversial topic for the producers of the products who would see the costs shift to them. But it's truly, if we can get it done in Illinois, it's a game changer for downstate Illinois and upstate. We would have the funding for drop-offs in downstate. Right now, there's the haves and have-nots. If you don't have a landfill, you probably don't have much funding. So that's an ongoing problem, and one that we continue to recognize as we talk. You know, Sarah Mummel, you know, bless her for being our downstate. We haven't had all our downstate people on the committee, to be honest, but she's been very important to that discussion. And I've done enough planning in downstate Illinois. I know the challenges in downstate Illinois and upstate. You know, and not to have a divide in Illinois, right? Because that's one thing we recognize as well. It's like it's just a different situation. So pretty excited though about packaging for EPR with the other states, with the plastics industry. We're on the U.S. Plastics Pact, which is looking at circular economy for plastics and diverting 50% in the next 5 years, right? Well, they're talking EPR. So now's the time, I believe, from the public sector's perspective, to really push on this concept. So I encourage you to come up to speed on that and join that discussion, because it's my agency's expectation to keep pushing this idea in Springfield, but not necessarily in this plan. I'm not here to have the plan, you know, dictate or try to solve all of our consensus building in the plan. We can go so far. And then it's really about Springfield and what we do locally with our own programs. So I'd throw that in there and see if we can get some more people to come up to speed on that whole concept of extended producer responsibility for packaging.
And just to second that, Walter, just on your maps, when you talked about the electronics drop-offs across the state, that's EPR legislation, and that is a pretty good assortment of locations for people. It's not perfect, but it definitely is serving over 85, I think, % of the population right now, which is no small task, and we all of the recycling.
Yep, and all done with what we call cost internalization, right? There is no upfront fee when you buy a TV or anything. It should be embedded in the cost of the product. That would be the same with the packaging EPR. If you go to your Jewel or wherever you shop, I doubt you're going to see the difference, because there's been studies on that. I always buy stuff on sale, so I'm looking for the sales all the time. And if you're getting your money out of the sale to cover the recycling of my home, good for you. That's what you need to do. And that brings harmony, it brings performance standards, it brings recycled content. All that gets brought into the same piece of legislation so that we solve this once and for all. Now, the waste industry, you know, they're freaking out, right? They've built all this infrastructure, they've got all these relationships, they've got all these contracts. What would happen to that, right? So it's a big discussion to have with multiple stakeholders. We don't want to recreate the wheel necessarily. So that's where the kind of the nationwide discussion's going with the haulers and the producers and the governments. And to Kay, we tried the Recycling Contamination Task Force, right? We tried to get everybody to use the same guidelines. I still see, no, they don't. So it's like, then we'll force a stewardship group to have one piece of messaging, right? So that's kind of kind of a discussion that I hope we start to have more and more.
I can't believe this group is this quiet. I don't see any questions popping up in the chat.
So just turn your camera on and ask us directly. Or you don't have to turn your camera on. I don't care. Well, it must be clear as mud, Marta.
It must be.
It's amazing. You guys have put in so much work, and it's very exciting to see it. And I do agree. Certainly, once the recommendations are made, then the real work is actually going to start to see them implemented. And as many of us as can get involved in that, the better. So we could give everybody back the last 5 minutes, I guess, of the presentation if everybody's so quiet and you want to just maybe follow up on your own later. Please make note, James did put that link into the website. You can go to the EPA's website there and find out when all the meetings are. You're certainly welcome to attend. It's open to the public, and you can make comments normally, if not during the meeting, at the end of the meeting. So yeah, they like to hear from folks. Well, thank you guys. I'm gonna take a moment here and close the meeting and remind everybody next month, May 19th, we'll be having our webinar on styrofoam, one of those hard to recycle items, and the company that Walter mentioned that is building a chemical styrofoam processing facility in Shanahan, Illinois, will be speaking on the panel. So you'll see some of the older technology that we all come to know, and then some of the new that's on the horizon. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marta. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a safe day.
Yep.
Happy Earth Week.
Yes. Thanks, Marta. Thanks, Gloria.
Oh, great. You were great, Kate. Everybody was great. Thank you.